still in the same train of thought. And so I've just been simply asking the question, how many believe that they have destiny here today?
Amen.
Amen.
If you didn't lift your hand because you don't believe it, you're mistaken. You do have destiny. You do have purpose. If you are born again in here this morning, you have a job to do in the kingdom of God. Your destiny, your purpose, and we can also add on to that, your assignment. There are things in this walk of faith, in this walk that you have begun. There is things God has equipped you with that only you can do. Now, a lot of times people say, well, if I don't do it, God will bring in someone who will. And there is truth to that. But at the same time, there is only one of you.
Amen.
And God has made us fearfully and wonderfully unique and placed distinction on you.
Amen.
If somebody has to fill my shoes because of my disobedience, or because of my unwillingness to go, they are not going to have the same distinction that was upon me, where it was God's intent for me to fill those shoes. Now God is bigger than us.
Amen.
And God has a way sometimes when we disobey and we refuse to go and do what He said to do, He's still able to get it done. But I would choose to be a vessel of the Lord rather than a hindrance. How many else would rather find themselves in that boat this morning? There is destiny in you. There is purpose in you. And you have an assignment. You have a job to do in the kingdom of God. A lot of Christians don't even consider the fact that there is something that God has called them to do. Beyond just the basic things of going to church, reading their Bibles, and all of these things are going to be important and basic in everything that you do. But there ought to be a time of examination or a hunger and a desire in our hearts to locate what God has called us to do.
Amen.
I'll say it again, there is distinction upon you. And so you are not called to do the same thing as the person sitting next to you. You will not be able to do everything that they can do the way that they do it. You can't speak like them. You can't help like them. You can't sing like them. You can't preach like them. But there are things you do that they cannot do. And too many people have just bypassed the very thought of what is my purpose. Where do I fit in this? Because we are here now in this earth as representatives of the kingdom of God. Amen. And this is what your purpose is all about. Operating in His kingdom and advancing the kingdom of God in the earth.
Right.
This is what your purpose is all about. It is not about just trying to get piles of money. It is not about painting yourself some picture of success where people will look at you and think, wow, they really did it. They got that house, they got that car, they got that wife, they got that husband, they got all of that. The world calls those things success. The world calls things success. And there's nothing wrong with things because God will give us and bless us with things. But things are for us to enjoy and not for us to seek and for us to love. But the Bible said to seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. And all of these things shall be added unto you. So before we're a seeker of things, we need to be a seeker of God. And never really being a seeker of things, but simply allowing God to add those things into our lives where we begin to enjoy things, have things, but our heart is for the Lord. So that when things go away, people quit and lose heart because things went away.
Yeah.
But God hasn't went anywhere.
Amen.
God is still faithful.
Yes.
Amen.
So as we talk about purpose, destiny, I've got to talk to you for a minute about a seed. Because this gives us a perfect example and picture of what destiny looks like on the inside of us. Now, some of us have advanced beyond just the basic seed form. But there is seeds of purpose and destiny inside of us. And you think of a seed for a minute. Let's just use the illustration of an apple seed because there's apple orchards all over the place around here. You think of that small little apple seed. That apple seed is not meant just to be a seed. That apple seed is full of purpose. That apple seed is meant to become an apple tree if it's in the right conditions and the right environment. There are seeds of purpose inside of you. Seeds of destiny inside of you. But will you allow yourself to become subject and submissive to God in such a way where He can begin to cultivate and draw out of you the purpose, the call that lies inside of you as a seed? The Bible tells us of Jeremiah, and I'll probably read a few scriptures here, so don't just get stuck waiting for me to read some scriptures, because if you haven't noticed, I'm already preaching this morning. That God spoke to Jeremiah and said, before you were in the belly, I knew you. When you were in the womb, I sanctified you, and I ordained you that you would be a prophet unto the nations. When you were still in the womb, ordained to be a prophet unto the nations. A high calling so significant inside a baby that is still inside the mother's womb. When you look at that child, you wouldn't see any of that. But it's in there. As that baby begins to grow, he looks like every other kid. But yet there's purpose and destiny inside of him that is awesome and significant, that he is going to be a prophet unto the nations. We've been talking about with giants and how that when David was called to go to take his brethren's pledge and see how they are, he ended up encountering a giant. And so where I am going to read today is 1 Samuel 17. Because I want to talk a little bit this morning about being sent by our Father. 1 Samuel 17 and 12. And then we'll read to 21. There's so many things in this text that we can continue to draw from. But it says here, now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of these 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn. Next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. One thing I want to pause and just make mention of this morning. David was being faithful where God had called him and appointed him to be at that time.
Yeah. Amen.
Following the road of purpose and destiny will not always be at the pace that we would choose. And sometimes we might think that we should be beyond or further than we ought to be. And may be tempted to try and cause our own promotion. Elevate ourselves. You ever see somebody who likes to talk about themselves? They're very quick to let you know they got a lot of money. You talk to them for 2 minutes and they already let you know that they got millions in the bank account, and they drive a Porsche and have several houses and a yacht, and on and on and on it goes, and they got to elevate themselves. That's their success. That's their success. But as I already stated, things is not a true picture of success. It has its place. And a lot of people are called, a lot of Christians are called, and their purpose is in the marketplace. And God is going to use them, elevate them, and bless them in the marketplace. But how many know the reason why God blesses us? Can anybody answer that this morning? God blesses us to be a blessing. We are blessed so that we can be a blessing and that we can bear fruit. You see, the true picture of success that I have found, it is not measured just by how much we have, but how fruitful we are. What we have done with what God has given us. Now that might sting a little bit this morning. Though that's something that'll make you pause and think for a minute. What have I done with what God has given me? Because He put purpose in you. And He's called you. And He's anointed you. And you have a part and a place in the kingdom of God that you must walk out. Nobody can fulfill your calling for you. Nobody is going to do what He has called you to do. So the picture of success and what we are aiming for in this life, what I could say, what is the secret of life? Be fruitful. Honor the Lord. Serve the Lord. Allow God to bring out of you in full everything that He has put inside of you. I promise you, if you will do that, it will exceed anything you thought you would ever be. It will exceed anything anybody ever thought you would be. It will exceed the limitations that were put upon your life. And it will be evident that it was God who has worked for you. It will be evident that it was God that was with you. So again, I'm going to say, what are you doing with what God has given you? When we think of the child, Jesus, can you think of any other child with such great destiny or purpose? And Jesus, at 12 years old, when He had stayed behind as His parents went on thinking He was with them, sits in the company of doctors, talking and debating. When His parents come back and find Him 3 days later, Jesus said, what are you doing? Don't you know I must be about my Father's business? I must be about my Father's business. Even at 12 years old, this was what was churning on the inside of Him. I must be about Daddy's business. I must be about my Father's business. And the Bible said that He went home with them and was submissive. He stayed where He was supposed to be until His time came. And so we read about David here, who's anointed to be king, but yet he stayed where he was supposed to be until his time came. And now we can keep on reading here a little bit, where we read the three eldest sons here. David was the youngest, it says, and the three followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of your brethren. Carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. Look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to fight. And he shouted for the battle, for Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. So someone just say this with me. The Father sent him.
The Father sent him.
He did not just decide to go. He was sent.
Yeah.
David was making a collision with his destiny. He did not know everything that was about to unfold.